Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight's stream. So, I'll be reading The Wife is First. It's a translated Chinese BL novel by Chrysanthemum Garden. So, today we'll be reading chapters 4 to 6. Without further ado, let's start chapter 4, part 1. Links are all in the description if you wish to read it yourself. Entering the Imperial Palace. Those beautiful black pupils that contain such emotions, compared to the spiritless appearance from before, it made him look much more quick-witted. Jing Shao merely smiled, watching helplessly. He wanted to tell him not to be so timid, but after thinking about it, in their previous life it was he who had refused to listen to him. Arrogance and conceited, thinking everyone was beneath him, in the end he suffered a miserable fate. After all, when a wall is about to collapse, everyone will give it a shove. He couldn't help but smile. Your Highness, we have arrived at the entrance, the Chunxi politely announced. Soon after, the sedan halted and was lowered. Normally, they would be allowed to enter the inner imperial palace on the sedan, but it was only that today they were paying a formal visit to the Empress's palace. They must exchange the sedan for an imperial carriage at the entrance gate. Surrounded by palace servants on all four sides of the carriage, the two inside were no longer willing to speak much. After the morning court assembly, Emperor Hongzheng went to the Empress's Luanyi palace, together with Empress Wu. The two were waiting in the main hall to meet the newly wedded bride and his bridegroom. At the age of 40, Emperor Hongzheng was in his prime. He was a qualified emperor, calm and wise. Just sitting there, he exerted an imposing aura. Looking at the imperial father, who was now about 12 years younger, Jing Shao concealed his clenched fist in his sleeve of his pale blue robes. Slowly unclenching it, he, together with Mu Hanzhang, respectfully offered the emperor and empress their greetings. Emperor Hongzheng praised Jing Shao before imparting a few words. You are now an adult. From now on, think before you speak and act. I do not want to hear of a similar incident that like of your queen mother's tea table. Your child understands. Thank you, Emperor Father, for your teaching. Jing Shao responded indifferently. His expression obviously showed his unwillingness to comply. On this happy occasion, Your Majesty, don't blame him anymore. The Empress was naturally very observant. She quickly laughed, offering him a way to avoid embarrassment. Today we get to see our daughter-in-law. The palace maid who was standing on the side quickly laid out a cushion in front of the Emperor and Empress. Mu Hanzhang stepped forward, kneeling down in order to kowtow to Emperor Hongzheng, then raised a cup of tea over the crown of his head in offering. Emperor Father, please have this cup of tea. All of his actions and mannerisms were complete, 100%, up to standard with how literary gentlemen should behave. Emperor Hongzheng received the tea, drank all of it in one smooth movement, and laughed. I did not expect Mu Jin's second son to have such a graceful character. Delighted, he happily rewarded him with a pair of sheet fat jade. Thank you, Emperor Father. Mu Hanzhang expressed his thanks neither too humbly nor haughtily. Turning to the side, he repeated adequate and kneeled in front of the Empress, offering her tea. The Empress smiled and took the tea leisurely, not at all in a hurry to allow him up, merely speaking with the Emperor. Your Majesty is very insightful. It is said that even before Mu Jia's second son turned 17 years old, he was already a very respected figure among the capital's young nobles. Is that so? This time, Emperor Hongzheng seemed to be very interested. To be able to pass the imperial examination at the age of 17 was rather rare. Previously, he had only seen the capable eldest son of the Beiwei Hojia. He never expected this one to appear. The son of a concubine, a hidden jewel. He couldn't help but feel a sense of pity. This person, if he had been allowed to take the imperial examination, he certainly would have been a gifted individual. Beiwei Ho would have good means of governance. It was truly a pity. It is merely the joke of a few childhood playmates. It is not true. Mu Hanzhang had been kneeling for a long time. His body was becoming more and more uncomfortable. his complexion was beginning to pale. Nonetheless, he continued to kneel. It was only by timely interjected a sentence that he was able to call attention to the fact that he was still kneeling. "Oh, child, why is your expression like this? Why is your complexion like this?" the empress said, taking a quick glance at Jing Shao's reaction, who appeared indifferent, not even bothering to ask someone to help Mu Hanzhang up. Narrowing her eyes, she laughed and gifted Mu Hanzhang a beautiful box full of priceless jewels. Mu Hanzhang looked at the very generous gift, recalled what Jing Shao had told him in the sedan, and accepted it without hesitation. When he stood up, his vision turned black for a second, and he swayed slightly. A palace maid was quick to step up and support him by his arm. "Since you are unwell, the both of you can return home," Emperor Hongzheng suggested for them to be dismissed. Mu Hanzhang refused any further support from the palace maid. Jing Shao was unconcerned. He walked out without a word. Only heaven knows that, at this very moment, he really wanted to carry Junqing in his embrace. However, they were still in the imperial palace. He could only hold back and feign impatience. Once out of the palace, stepping down the imperial carriage, Mu Hanzhang faced forward and looked at the person, who was walking away in large strides, his figure cold and unfeeling. Mu Hanzhang smiled and laughed at himself mockingly. What had he expected? Sure enough, weren't those brief moments of tenderness just an illusion? In an effort to keep up, he quickened his pace. He did not even walk 2 steps before his vision suddenly turned black. He had not expected his body to be so unwell that he would fall. But he only felt himself fall into a warm embrace. "Junqing, what's wrong?" Only when he opened his eyes again, a few short seconds after, did he see Jing Shao's anxious expression. Chapter 4, Part 2, Entering the Imperial Palace, continued. Jing Shao saw him faint, and in the blink of an eye, he pulled that person into his embrace, quickly carrying him into the sedan. "Chunxi, go to the Imperial Physician's courtyard and request Jiang Huan, Jing Taiyi to come to my Wangfu. Raise the sedan and immediately set out for my palace." "Yes," the sedan bearers responded in unison. Quickly lifted the sedan, Chunxi hurriedly ran all the way to the Imperial Physician's court. Junqing, where do you feel unwell? Jing Shao laid him backwards in his embrace, against his chest, and touched that person's forehead. "How did you develop a fever?" Mu Hanzheng merely kept silent. This person was hot and cold, very hard to figure out. Today, in front of the palace, this person looked at him with regret, and repeatedly made him feel inferior. He was initially already in pain, his body unwell, and now he felt distressed in his heart and mind. It was difficult to bear. But he only felt disheartened. His consciousness was beginning to fade. "Guan Sha'er seems to be unhappy with the marriage arrangement I planned for him." After the 2 people left, the empress turned towards the emperor and said embarrassedly, "He is still young. Naturally, he doesn't understand your troubles, but this child's affections are genuine." Emperor Hongzhen was very satisfied. Just now, in Jing Shao's reflection, he clearly saw and understood. Whether or not he could accept it, whether or not he liked it, his expressions were sincere. If he lost the right to succession and was still unable to fake that grateful appearance, then he was truly too unfathomable. Back at the prince's palace, Jing Shao held that person in his embrace and entered the main residence. "Quickly, fetch a towel." After covering Mu Hanzheng with a good quilt, Zhi Xi handed Jing Shao a cold towel to put on that person's forehead. "Junqing, how do you feel now?" Jing Shao looked at him in distress. In the last lifetime, Mu Hanzheng's health continuously worsened more and more. Ultimately, in the last few years, he had to take medicine at every meal. In this lifetime, he would certainly be more attentive and to keep him strong and healthy to the best of his abilities. "I am fine. Don't you have to go visit the second prince? Don't delay," he persuaded, struggling to sit up. Seeing this, Jing Shao pressed him down. "My brother already sent someone to say that he will not blame me." Although he knew that he should go to his brother, etiquette was one thing. It was more important to not be misunderstood. Jing Shao felt that Junqing's health was very important, but he really shouldn't go to his but he really should go to his brother's palace to explain later. Your Highness, the imperial physician has arrived, Zhi notified. While Jing Taiyi was an imperial physician in the imperial physician courtyard, he was not the head physician. Even if his skills were rather good, he never expected for Chen Wang to call him over to treat a patient. He had rather mixed feelings about it. This Jing Taiyi took Meng Hanzhang's pulse and looked at his complexion. Awkwardly, he turned to face Jing Shao. Jing Shao understood and dismissed all the servants to retreat. Imperial physician, may speak what is on your mind. Observing Wang Fei's pulse, his condition is presumably caused by pent-up negative emotions and thoughts, which then became harmful to the body. Jing Taiyi glanced at Jing Shao. This type of fever was not a serious illness, but since Chen Wang had called him over, there was definitely more to it. He could only go with the flow. This old official would speak plainly. Although Wang Fei is male, concerned the deed between a married couple compared to women, it is easier for men to sustain injuries. Your Highness should be more careful. Saying it so bluntly, Mu Hanzhang's entire face turned red. Jing Shao embarrassedly touched the tip of his own nose. Yes, I was too hasty and impulsive. Your Highness, pardon the offense. Jing Taiyi was a bit apprehensive, unable to guess Chen Wang's intentions. Haha, I am rather fond of Jing Taiyi's straightforwardness. After taking the prescription written by Jing Taiyi and handing it over to Meng Xi to deconcoct, Jing Shao took out a string of coral beads from his sleeve. Your Highness, I cannot accept it. Jing Taiyi was immediately frightened, his whole body breaking out in a cold sweat. He had always avoided attracting attention to himself, as he did not want to be dragged into the dispute between the royal heirs. This is not for you. Jing Shao saw that he was hesitant and couldn't help but say, I heard that your son excels in martial arts. This year, he passed the military examinations. It is a congratulatory gift for him. It is said that red coral beads can help people avoid mortal danger. It was indeed a good item for martial artists to have. Furthermore, it was not good for Jing Taiyi to continuously decline His Highness's goodwill towards his son. Like this, he set his mind at ease. If that is the case, then this old minister thanks Chen Wang for the reward on behalf of my son. Some other day, I will send him over to express his thanks. Jing Taiyi heard him and accepted the red coral beads, then packed up, saluted, and took his leave. Jing Shao ordered Duo Fu to see the imperial physician out as he sat down on the bedside in order to change Mu Hanzhang's forehead towel. These things just make the servants do it. Your Highness should rest, Mu Hanzhang said in a lukewarm manner. Currently, this person was gentle and soft. Perhaps it was because this person felt that it was new and amusing. In reality, this person was not at all sincere about treating him well. Was this person sincere or not? In his heart, he made his own conclusions, looking at the details, the events that occurred today in the imperial palace, the heart that had just warmed up, immediately froze into ice. Junqing? Jing Shao saw that this person, who had just let their guard down this morning, was once again becoming distant with him. As expected, it was the events that happened in the palace that made him sad. He had always been impatient and spoke rashly. However, with Junqing's temper, this person would definitely suppress everything in his heart. It looks like, in the future, there were still many things for them to talk about. Jing Shao scratched his head and sighed. Today in the imperial palace, you were wronged. Mu Hanzhang opened his eyes and looked on passively at him. This person was actually aware of this? It is merely kneeling for a few moments. I am not a woman. I won't feel aggrieved just because mother-in-law wanted to display her authority. Your Highness is just being overly sensitive. The voice is very gentle, absolutely pleasing to the ears, but for this person to say that they did not have even a bit of resentment, Jing Shao thought that this person was truly angry. In the capital, the people ridicule me, saying despite the fact that I've made great achievements, I'm unable to inherit the kingdom. Although I am a legitimate heir to the throne, I am no better than a bastard prince born to a palace maid. Jing Shao spoke these words in a self-depreciating tone. This had been something he had suppressed in his heart for more than a dozen years. It was only now that he was finally speaking the words from the bottom of his heart. Mu Hanzhang's hand that was concealed under the quilt gradually tightened into a fist, his heart becoming more and more cold. Sure enough, last night, this person had not been drunk at all. Everything, all of it, was simply because he wanted to physically torment him, nothing more. I, your servant, am now aware. I will not request anything else from your highness. Only beg your highness to reward me with divorce papers once you have obtained recognition and success. Chapter 5, Part 1, Fever. Divorce? Jing Shao was stunned. After recovering from the shock, he sneered. You are a man. Divorcing you doesn't really affect your reputation. Nevertheless, as a divorced man, you will not be allowed to pass the entrance examination. Even if I let you go, in this lifetime, you are destined to miss the emperor examination. Then what do you want? Mu Hanzheng sat up and looked at him coldly. If this person wanted to keep him here to be tormented, he would definitely not endure this abuse. I can't inherit the throne, and you can't participate in the civil examination. Therefore, we are even, Jing Shao said with a slightly self-righteous magnetic tone. Ah? Mu Hanzheng was stunned for a long time. In the originally cold face of Junqing appeared a cracked, quite a silly expression, his mouth half open. It felt as if he had been choked and then thrown into the air, only to land on a soft cushion in the end. Jing Shao saw his stupefied expression and thought it was funny. He wanted to try reaching out to poke it, but a voice from the outside called, Your Highness! His Highness's medicine is ready. Jing Shao frowned and allowed Meng Xi to bring in the medicine. Mu Hanzheng reined in his expression and lowered his head, not saying a thing. Meng Xi took a quick glimpse of his expression, smiled, and walked over to the bedside. Your Highness, please allow this servant to serve His Highness the medicine. Meng Xi carried the medicine, embarrassedly looking over to the bedside where Jing Shao was motionless. Jing Shao took the medicine bowl and moved his hand to the door for Meng Xi to retreat, turning his face towards the door. Duofu! Here, Duofu smiled and revealed his head through the small space between the doors. Got outside the door. Jing Shao saw his appearance and thought it was somewhat funny. Duofu was already this age, but still behaved like a child. Yes, Duofu naturally understood what the prince meant. He dismissed the rest of the servants to go do other work and ordered for the guards to stand at each corner of the residence, while he himself guarded the front door, basking in sunlight and smiling, making sure that no one could lean against the door and hear what His Highnesses were saying. You didn't listen to everything I said, I had to say. Jing Shao held the medicine in his palm and stirred it. Those are words said by outsiders. My abilities, I know them well. Even if I marry the Queen Mother of the West, I would not be able to sit in that position. Your Highness, why do you say such a thing? Mu Hanzheng licked his lips, listening to Jing Shao speak in a tone so openly. His expression didn't seem to be faked. Could he really have doubted that person wrongly? Jing Shao handed the medicine bowl to him. I entered the military camp at age 14 and have been on the battlefield for so many years now. I've gone through many challenging experiences and have become well versed in the art of warfare, but I know nothing of governing a country. Look at me. I cannot even draw an imperial physician to my side. Even this is already difficult. How can I compete for the throne? Mu Hanzhang took the bowl of medicine that was in front of him. So it turned out that he was bribing the imperial physician in front of him just for the sake of showing him an example. Although I understand it myself, who can say this? Take today's meeting for example. If I helped you while we were in the palace, Emperor Father would have thought that although I appeared innocent on the surface, I am full of schemes. It would have caused even more trouble later. After saying this, Jing Shao could not help but sigh. If he had not been so outrightly defiant, Emperor Father wouldn't have had to restrain him like this. Wu Hanzheng held the bowl of pitch black medicine and downed it in one gulp, only tasting the bitterness of it at the root of his tongue. So it turned out even the princess and emperor grandsons had their own difficulties. Just as soon as he finished putting down the bowl of medicine, a candied fruit was stuffed into his mouth. Wu Hanzheng raised his head to see, just barely catching that person's smile as that person wiped away the dregs of medicine at the corners of his mouth. Jing Shao was born beautiful and extraordinary. It was only that he normally did not like to smile. Now seeing it like this, he was especially good looking. He had heard that Chen Wang was irritable, easily angered, and taciturn, but since last night, from the very beginning, this person had smiled at him many times. Wu Hanzheng gave a light sigh. Maybe he should trust him. After all, he was genuine and had nothing to conspire. If your highness wishes to win over Jiang Taiyi, it is not completely impossible, Wu Hanzheng said while eating the candied fruit. Oh? Jing Shao looked at him with interest. Wu Hanzheng felt tired, and without asking, leaned onto the big pillow on the bed. Simply have Jiang Taiyi's son enlist in one of the troops under your highness's command, and then plan for him to making a big or small mistake. The old fellow will certainly come to beg your highness. Junqing? Jing Shao looked at him with a pleasant surprise. He wasn't very familiar with the connections of those in the imperial physician court yet. Calling on Jiang Huan had only been because he was known for being slippery and private. Today, he was given such an advantage. From now on, he would remember to yield to Junqing and take care of him. If he had such an ability, he would be able to draw anyone over to his side. This was certainly an unexpected joy. Jing Shao abruptly threw himself onto Junqing for a hug. You really are a military strategist. Like this, I can gain followers without having to spend so much effort. Wu Hanzheng scheming for him, and allowing him to explain himself, meant that he had already accepted him. Chapter 5, Part 2, Fever continued. Your Highness, having a heavy person dropped on top of him out of the blue, Wu Hanzheng couldn't breathe properly for some time. Haha, you shouldn't sit up. Quickly lie down so that you can break your fever. Jing Shao said happily, immediately moving to stuff him back inside the quilt and wrap the quilts around him before settling at his side, putting Junqing in his embrace. Wu Hanzheng was dumbfounded for only a moment, but by the time he managed the reaction, he was already wrapped like a silkworm in a cocoon. It was just that there was an extra octopus encompassing him. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Indeed, this person did have a quick temper. With his face pressed into Jing Shao's chest, Wu Hanzheng could only helplessly adjust his position, putting off a little distance between them. Junqing, in future, if anything happens, I will tell you. If you have any opinions or ideas, you must also tell me. This way, we can avoid having any quarrels. Jing Shao lifted his hand and pulled down the headband from the person in the middle of his embrace, stroking the top of his head gently. Wu Hanzheng responded vaguely with a muffle. His consciousness was relaxed, and he somewhat drowsy. Junqing, during that wedding night, I was really unhappy and drank too much. I thought that since everyone didn't believe in me, then I should just let everyone believe that I am no good. Jing Shao narrowed his eyes. Indeed, this was what he thought when he had woken up. But after pondering it over, and knowing what would happen in future, winning that position was not impossible. But when I woke up and saw you, I changed my mind. Mu Hanzheng did not answer. He only listened attentively. Jing Shao saw that there was no sound from the person in his embrace, and thinking that he was asleep, gently touched that person's hair. I think it is better just to live a good life with you. Whether people believe in me or not, it is not important. In the future, I will protect you, and not let you suffer even a little wrong. Towards this person in his embrace, he was still unsure of how he felt. He only knew that this person was the only one who was willing to accompany him through everything, even death. Reborn in this lifetime, he harbored suspicions towards everyone at every step, and with every step there was only murderous intentions. Only him. This person was his redemption. He would embrace him tightly and never let go. The whisper that was said and seemingly gentle, as if Jing Shao was saying it to himself. Unknowingly, he tightened his embrace towards the person in the middle of his chest and made a small smile. When Mu Hanzheng broke his fever, it was already past noon. Jing Shao had sent Duofu to personally deliver a message to the second prince's manor, telling his older brother that it was his fault for not visiting, and may instead visit later that night. Although the imperial family was very large and had many people, their circumstance was special. As they were newly married, they didn't need to pay courtesy to that many people. At any rate, his personal relationship with his brother had always not been very good. Might as well just pay a courtesy visit to his older brother's family later. Now that it was afternoon, it was inappropriate to go at this time. Instead, he simply changed his clothes and had lunch with his wife till his heart's content. Who would have guessed that just as food was being taken away, Duofu came to announce that the second prince and his consort had come. Jing Shao heard this and right away put down his teacup and headed out. Your Highness, Mu Hanzheng pulled him back. Change your clothes before you go out. Oh! Jing Shao smacked his forehead. He forgot that his sister-in-law would also be there. If he appeared wearing this, it would be improper. Like this, he hurriedly changed his clothes. He didn't think that he would meet his brother so soon after waking up. There were so many things he wanted to say. This time around, he could not be so muddle-headed. Your Highness, I will not go. Mu Hanzheng pulled back the hand that Jing Shao was holding. What's wrong? Since it was a formal visit, even if the person is his elder brother, he still had to follow tradition by greeting him and serving him tea. In addition, they should also prepare a first meeting gift. Jing Shao stopped in his track to look at him. Mu Hanzheng lit his lips. Your Highness did not go to the second brother's manor because I was sick. Although he is your brother, it is still better to avoid a misunderstanding because of this minor incident. Eh? Jing Shao was dumbfounded for a long time. It took a moment for him to realize that Junqing was afraid that his older brother would see that he, Junqing, was well, and think that Jing Shao's intentionally not going over to his second brother's manor, thus hurting the brothers' amicable relationship. He couldn't help but smile. He held Mu Hanzheng's waist and pulled him close, laughing. In the future, if Junqing has something to say, then just be straightforward. My brain isn't very good. Mu Hanzheng quickly took a look at him and softly replied, In the future, I will remember it. Your Highness should go quickly. He was unaware that their relationship between Jing Shao and his brother, of the same mother, was extraordinary. If he had said these words straightforwardly, there would be suspicions that he was trying to sow discord between them. Since he was an outsider who had just crossed into the familial boundary, it would be better for him to be careful with what he said. Junqing, are you remembering to speak straightforwardly with me, or are you noting down that my brain doesn't function well? Seeing that he answered so quickly, Jing Shao couldn't help but tease him. All remembered. Mu Hanzheng's expression didn't change. It was still as indifferent as before. Jing Shao, seeing his Junqing calm, even in a perilous situation expression, thought that he was remarkably good-looking. After looking around and seeing that no one was paying attention, he stole a kiss on the cheek and quickly went out of the door. Mu Hanzheng watched Jing Shao's departing figure and slowly wiped where he had been kissed on the cheek. The corner of his lips couldn't help but curve upwards. Because the second prince's visit was so sudden, Jing Shao did not have time to go welcome him. Duofu conveniently directed the group of people into Tingfeng Pavilion to have tea. Tingfeng Pavilion was where Jing Shao normally studied or strolled about. It was considered to a part of the inner courtyard and was only used to receive close guests. The structure of the prince's manor was as such. The courtyard in front was the outer yard. Passing there was a flower garden where Tingfeng Pavilion was located. Behind that, the place was further divided into the East Residence and West Residence. Jing Shao lived in the East Residence while the women's folk resided in the West Residence. The tea room was decorated elegantly. The exquisite tables and chairs, many of them were made in Xiangnan style. On all four sides, excluding the pillars, the walls were carved decoratively. In the winter, when they huddled up into a small circle, it would be quite warm. In the summer, they could conveniently remove the walls to allow for ventilation. On the flower shelves were seasonal flowers and plants. A few had thin vines which wrapped around the pillars. At this time, the soft green buds were already blooming with hints of yellow, filling the place with life. In the tea room, the man sitting at the head seat was dressed in dark yellow outfit, reserved for princes. His figure was slender. He had an elegant and handsome appearance. Just by sitting there, he had a powerful, but not oppressive, dignified air. Using the five senses, he and Jing Shao were about 70% similar. It was only that Jing Shao was three-tenths less austere and a bit more calm. This person was Jing Shao's older brother of the same mother, Empress Yuan's elder son, Jing Shen. Chapter 5, Part 3, Fever. Wang Ye! Mu Hanchang pulled him back. Change your clothes. Oh? ちょっと. Ah, wait, it's the same one. Okay. Last one for today, Chapter 6. The concubines residing in the inner court. 哥哥. The closer he got to the tea hall, the more excited he got, and in his footsteps couldn't help but speed up. He hadn't even entered the room and had already called to the person. Jing Chen put down the cup. Jing Chen put down the cup in his hand and wrinkled his brow slightly. Seeing Jing Shao, who was hurriedly walking in, he couldn't help but scold. You are already married now, and is still so impatient. You shouldn't be like this. Jing Shao repressed his natural disposition and stopped, then shook his head, and forced a smile. Ever since he was small, he was used to being reprimanded by his brother. And once he heard him begin scolding, all he wanted to do was run. But now, as he heard the sentence, "You shouldn't be like this," there was an incomparable sense of familiarity, and he only hoped that his brother would from now on reprimand him for a long time. He walked in casually, and seeing his brother furrowing his brows, staring at him, he couldn't help but smile and go over to pay respects to his brother and sister-in-law. Shushu. His sister-in-law, Concert Xiao, who was sitting next to him, rose and returned the greeting. Seeing that Jing Chen was still cold-faced and not speaking, she smiled and said, "Originally we weren't supposed to come. However, hearing that younger brother was unwell and not seeing you go to your office, your brother was not at ease, so he brought me here with him." In ordinary people's families, they went over to their parents, brothers, and sister-in-laws to pay respect in the morning, and in the afternoon they would visit their parents-in-law. So although coming this time was somewhat unexpected, it was still acceptable. Jing Shao naturally understood the reason behind it. Hearing his sister-in-law say this, he raised his head and looked at his brother, whose brow was still wrinkled. It suddenly felt warm in his heart. During his last lifetime, he was really blind, thinking that his brother wrinkling his brows at him every day was him thinking that Jing Shao was an eyesore, yet not knowing this person was doing so much for him in places he was not aware of. Brother. Jing Shao slowly walked in front of his elder brother and opened his mouth, yet only that one word came out. Jing Chen stared blankly. Astonished, he raised his head to look at him. Since their emperor father had decreed for him to be married to the second son of Marquis Beiwei, this young brother, whom he had loved and protected ever since he was a child, would not call him brother again. When meeting each other, he would only call out second imperial prince, making his heart ache. Today, he didn't have any hopes that Jing Shao would come visit him, but he did not expect the steward of the prince's manor to personally come and apologize for shirking their meeting previously, allowing him to step up some hope in his heart. After waiting until noon had passed, and seeing that he had still not come, he couldn't sit still and went over himself. He didn't expect that there would be such a pleasant surprise. Seeing that the two brothers seemed to have words to say to each other, Consort Xiao smiled as she got up and said, "I will go see your Wang Fei." Sao Zi, Junqing has not got up yet. You and Ge wait here just for a moment. I will go call him to come out. Xing Shao quickly blocked Concert Xiao. Oh, look at me. I'm all muddled. Concert Xiao blanked for a moment, then annoyingly wrung the handkerchief in her hands, so embarrassed that her face turned crimson. His Wang Fei was a man. Although she is his sister-in-law, he was still a man, and she couldn't just go visit his bedside. But his elder brother could go into the bedroom and visit his sister-in-law. Jing Chen glanced thoughtfully at his wife, got up, and said to Jing Shao, "Younger brother's consort is sick. Don't make him suffer. I will go with you to see." Duofu, who was on the other side, heard this, and quickly called a little servant girl to run fast and go inform the Wang Fei. When Jing Shao took his brother to the bedroom of the east wing, he saw Mu Hanzhang wearing an outer garment, leaning on the soft divan in the outer room, covered with a thin blanket. The outer garment was loose and had a soft texture. At first glance, one could tell that it was something for wearing at home. Although it was not very formal, the way the clothing was tied was very neat and proper. Seeing that the person in question was sick, it was also not considered lacking in manners. Looking at the situation, Jing Chen nodded to himself and stopped Mu Hanzhang's action from getting to the greeting. "How come on the second day of being newly married you are already sick?" Jing Chen looked at his younger brother. Today, when he heard that Chen Wang's wife was ill, his first reaction was wondering what must have happened when visiting the court in the morning. This, Jing Shao coughed lightly, rubbed his nose. No matter how thick one's skin was, under his brother's gaze, he would still blush a little. Mu Hanzhang looked at the embarrassed Jing Shao, slightly curved his mouth and said, "Elder brother Prince does not have to worry. I just caught a little cold and have a bit of fever. Drinking some medicine has helped bring it down." Right. Marcus Bei Wei's family is too stingy. The wedding dress made it so thin. Jing Shao busily went along with it, yet trying to cover it up only made it more conspicuous. Mu Hanzhang could not help but roll his eyes. Jing Chen looked at his younger brother and sighed. You go to the study room with me. I have some words to say to you." Jing Shao hung his head dejectedly and was dragged away. But before he was completely out of the door, he turned back and made a pitiful expression towards Mu Hanzhang. Mu Hanzhang was amused by his appearance. He didn't know that such a normally taciturn and grave person would, in front of his own brother, turn into a small child. He couldn't help but laugh out. The elegant as a lily magnolia nobleman suddenly revealed a vibrant smile, creating a bright countenance that could indescribably move someone. Jing Shao, seeing him smile and smiling sweetly, contentedly followed his brother to the study room to be admonished. "This one wishes sister-in-law good health." Concert Xiao looked at the full-of greetings, Song Ling Xin, and couldn't help but wrinkle her brow. This was Jing Shao's secondary wife. She had already crossed the threshold 2 years ago. By rights, she was allowed to call her Sao Zi. But now the Wang Fei had already crossed the threshold, yet this Madame Song still appeared in the tea room like she was the mistress, dressed in a water pink embroidered gauze dress, wearing a beaded golden phoenix hairpin, so ostentatiously. "How come you have come?" Concert Xiao was still nervous about that glare the second prince had given her. Now, seeing this kind of Song Ling Xin made her feel even more agitated. And without much politeness, she just directly asked that. Wang Ye and His Highness, the second prince, must have something to talk about. This servant thought that Sao Zi was drinking tea all alone and must be bored. So I prepared some tea and refreshments in a small reception pavilion, specially to serve Sao Zi to taste. Song Ling Xin said this cleverly, deliberately using ambiguous words to imply that Jing Shao had instructed her to do this. Concert Xiao thought about it. This Wang Fei was a man, and couldn't entertain her. Having a secondary wife accompany her to drink tea was also not inappropriate. Moreover, those two brothers had been gone for this long and were still not back. They definitely had some big political event to discuss. So she rose and followed Concubine Song to the west courtyard. "Young master." This slave heard that the second prince's wife went with the secondary wife to a small reception pavilion to drink tea. Lan Ting replenished Mu Hanzhang's tea and whispered to him. Oh? Mu Hanzhang, who was reclining on the divan, looked up from his book and with some mirth glanced at the nervous little girl. Where did you hear this from? Lan Ting's character was quick-witted, just young. The time following him was also short, so she could not help but be a little bit timid. Today, she actually took the initiative to try find out some news. Naturally, he had to encourage her a little. When I went to the tea room to replenish water, I heard Sister Meng Xi say it. Lan Ting bit her lip and her face was quite angry. The tone of Meng Xi was clearly praising the secondary wife, yet towards this young master gave a cold shoulder as if reveling in schadenfreude. Mu Hanzhang nodded. You did well. Then he immediately moved his eyes to the back of the book. Young master, Lan Ting was very dissatisfied with her young master's uncaring attitude. You don't even know what Meng Xi said. Mu Hanzhang looked up grudgingly, his tone serene. She must have said that the Wang Fei has just gotten married, and on the second day he was already suppressed by the second wife. In the future, she doesn't know who she should listen to, right? Lan Ting was surprised, and her eyes were wide open. Young master, how did you know? Mu Hanzhang shook his head and smiled. This foolish girl. Everything was written on her face. Even if he didn't want to know, it would be hard not to tell. Reporting to Wang Fei, Wang Ye had me tell you that he will be having dinner with His Highness the Second Prince, so you don't have to wait for him. Zhi Si came in and delivered the message, and let the person carrying the food box put it down. All right. Mu Hanzhang put the book in his hand down and sat at the dinner table. At noon, when he had a fever, he had no appetite. Now he was really hungry. Zhi Si personally stood at the table and served dishes. Mu Hanzhang picked up the rice bowl and looked at the table full of exquisite dishes. It was much more luxurious than what he had at Beiwei Marquis's residence, and when marrying into the Wang Ye's family, it was not necessary to pay respects to his mother-in-law every day. If a woman married into the Cheng Wang's house, and wouldn't she be happy? Thinking of Jing Shao's tender smile, Mu Hanzhang couldn't help but sigh. If he was a daughter born of the concubine from the Marquis Beiwei's family, he was definitely not qualified to marry Cheng Wang. He still wondered whether his situation was fortunate or unfortunate. Zhi Si, is there a map of this place? After dinner, Mu Hanzhang held a cup of tea and asked on a whim. Responding to Wang Fei, there is a map in the small study room. This slave will look for it. Zhi Si respectfully answered. The small study room is in the east wing, not far from the bedroom. And she soon returned with a map. Mu Hanzhang regarded Zhi Si actually being able to go into the study and get something for him was inevitably surprised. Jing Shao would actually let him look at the things in the study as he pleased. He didn't believe that without Jing Shao's permission, that servant girl would be able to get whatever for him. But then he thought that perhaps he was thinking too much. The small study could really just not have any important secrets. He slowly opened the scroll in his hands. The precise style of painting was obviously one of a thoroughly planned out design. The outline of the prince's manor was clear with a glance. The residence is divided into the front and two rear courtyards, which were separated by the flower gardens and the Tingfeng Pavilion. The Tingfeng Pavilion included a tea hall, study room, a warming room, water room, and other such places. The rear court is divided into the east and west courtyards, and the east wing is Jing Shao's residence. The west were for womenfolk. Because Mu Hanzhang is not considered part of the womenfolk, he couldn't live in the west wing, and so he just lived in the east wing together with Jing Shao. His gaze swept through the whole painting and finally settled on the bamboo pavilion. This should be what they call the small reception pavilion, which is located in the center of the west court. Mu Hanzhang closed the scroll. He is a man. Having the secondary wife receive his elder brother and sister-in-law was what ought to be. But whether this was what Jing Shao instructed Madame Song to do, or what she did of her own accord, the significance of it was very different. Reporting to Wang Fei, the two concubines of the west courtyard have come to greet Wang Fei and have tea. Meng Xi came in from the outside door, smiling gleefully as she said, secretly observing the reaction of Mu Hanzhang. Mu Hanzhang, hearing what was said, couldn't help but frown slightly. Sheng Wang had a secondary wife and two concubines. This he knew even before their marriage. Today, both of them had come to greet him. Yet how come the good at understanding others and knowing when to advance and retreat secondary wife had not come? Was she trying to demonstrate something to him, or trying to feel out the prince's attitude towards him? The corner of his lips turned up in a smile. Woman's little tricks. Truly so boring. He got up and changed his clothes, letting the two concubines wait in the reception room. Not hurrying and not being slow, he switched into a long sapphire blue garment. He didn't even wear a crown on his head. He let Lan Ting use a hair ribbon of the same color and tie his hair as she wished. Finally, he called for the two concubines to enter the room. Zhi, seeing the situation at hand, also couldn't help but frown. In her heart, she thought, could it be that the secondary wife had gone with the prince to send a guest off? But on her face, she had a smile introducing Mu Hanzhang to them. Dressed in a phoenix yellow dress, with a gentle and lovely countenance, was the fourth-rank concubine Liu, and in the jade-colored dress, delicate and spirited, was fifth-rank concubine Li. Right, so that's all for today's reading. Thank you for joining. I have a lot of things to do, so I'm going to cut the stream short. Let me know if you want me to continue reading this next time. I will try and find a day for this regular bedtime storytelling thing. Yeah, so that's all for today. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.